All right, rapid chess time here on Feisty Chess. I'm going to play e4 as white against Billy Samarias. A 15-10 game. Tried to get a 10-5 game on Lichess. All right, we got a French defense. A French defense. Let's play the main lines. Knight c3. Let's go for e5 instead of bishop g5 this time. This is what I usually play in tournaments. This would be a more closed variation, but I'll get a kingside attack. I go knight c to e2. I want to meet c5 with c3. Keep a pawn on d4. So it's kind of like a delayed advance variation, but we got our knights to d7 and e2 respectively. I'll be able to play f4. I might not castle. Black might not let me castle, in fact. Okay, c5, c3. We have time for f4. Really bulking up that center. Knight f3 is coming next. If e2 knight can get a little bit awkward. A lot of lines I need to play a3 because after exchanges here, well, that's the main line advance. I'm not sure that applies so much to this variation, but my plan is actually to go g4 and then maybe play knight to g3. Maybe include h4 in there somewhere. And I'm aiming to push f5. Basically, this is one of those openings where I've got more space and I'm just going to try to hang on to it. I might slow my development to do that, but keeping this monster pawn structure intact is the central goal. Yeah, a lot of people play the French defense around these parts. So in tournaments, may those tournaments rest in peace. If he plays c takes d4, maybe I'll go for knight takes d4. I don't know. That seems kind of unprincipled because the whole point of c3 is to prop that up. No, it'll be good. I'll stick with the pawn strategy. Knight f3, g4, bishop g2. Might be able to castle at some point, but it might not be necessary, especially if there's h4. Okay. Billy Samarias is having the first big think here. Okay, we've already made our decision there. All right, I'm happy with this. I got bishop d2. I could also even consider king f2 here. But I welcome this exchange of bishops if black wants it. Bishop c3 looks perfectly reasonable too, if needed. Might not need that. Okay. I'd also welcome the exchange of queens. a3 would just hasten things along here. But why cooperate with black's plans? We've got moves to play on the king side. Developing, further supporting our center. His bishop is pinned. Okay. We want to offer the exchange of queens. I think so. I really like the looks of an endgame now that we've traded dark square bishops, and his light square bishop is terrible. Mine will be good. You can go knight b4 instead. It has a little bit of a threat to it. I'm not worried about that, though. I can actually just go knight to c3 and develop pretty harmoniously. So yeah. If he takes the queen, I'm probably recapturing with the king. Yeah, this is just accelerating my own development here. My king is very happy on d2, just one step closer to the center. The center being locked up. Okay, black has simplified things greatly. Plans from here. Probably get a rook on c1. Probably want to play a3. I don't see any need to play that immediately, though. How to develop our bishop. I don't see a lot that's productive for black to do. If he goes b6, well, I can avoid the exchange of bishops. This knight on e2 may look clunky. If he plays something like d6 and a5, he can get bishop a6 in. He might be able to force a trade of bishops, but this knight being on e2 means that I have other routes for my bishop. Looking at g4 or g3. Probably g4 is the way to go. Okay, this makes sense. He wants to come into c4. I could shut that down with b3 very simply, or I could try knight here and planning. Let's just keep it simple. b3 shuts that knight down pretty completely. So let's do it. Okay. Maybe getting a knight to c5 was pretty good. I'm looking at knight to c1 here as a transitional move to get that knight to d3. I don't think the action is really going to take place on the king side here, so let's think. Does that rook want to be on c1? Well, probably, but does he need to be right now? I don't think so. I like the look of a knight on d3. If you come into c5, it also watches over b4. So if we trade knights, I'm more than happy to trade. Other options. Knight c3. Could get the knight to b5, maybe? He's likely to play a6 then. It does get another pawn on a dark square for him, on a light square. And my knight doesn't really have anything to do from there. Maybe I could... There's lots of places my knight could go. My knight could bounce from here, and once he plays a6, I bounce back here, aiming to go here. No, not here, but up here. Too many things here. Here's the plan, more or less. Yeah, knight on e3 would be good. If I can get a bishop to d3. Okay. Let's do this. It's a little more harmonious, I think. If he ever plays a knight in to b4, I can just kick it. Okay, knight c3. We'll get a rook to c1. Get a bishop on this diagonal. Maybe a3 right now. He's got knight a4, a5 after a3. And that pawn's kind of weak, so I don't need to worry about that. Okay, let's bring this rook to c1. We're not expecting the rook to need to stay on the a file or the queen side. Plan is bishop here, and then it can drop back there if needed. We've connected our rooks. Maybe thinking about doubling on the c file in the long term. This knight can also come here. Our center is very healthy. I don't see how black can put any more pressure on this pawn, but even if so, king e3 is usually a resource to support it further. He's going for castle. Well, in that case, let's get our bishop on this diagonal. Yeah, that's the plan. And if he ever tries to play f5, I'm taking en passant and leaving him with this glaring weakness on e6. G4, followed by F5 is an idea now. I like this. Okay. If he's planning on recapturing with the rook, I need to deal with the threat on my f-pawn. I've got king e3 if I need it. That holds everything together. It keeps an eye on d4, f4, and this knight, in case that needs protection. If I go take, g3, I don't know, he doesn't have any pushes yet. If I let him play f6, he'll probably play f5 next move. Actually, if I play g4 right now, that becomes less of a threat. g4, f5, take. I've got this beast of a passer. Black's bishop is not really any better. And this would be kind of weak too. Let's play g4. It does loosen the knight up, doesn't it? Hold on, g4, take, and I can't take this way because my knight hangs. Okay, g4 is a bad move. I'm going to go with my alternative then, which is just to take. I think I've got good options. If he takes with the pawn, I'll be happy. That e6 pawn is still a weakness. I got e5 really clamped. I think he needs to take with the rook. Okay, and just g3 does look good. King e3. G3, and I'm not looking at playing g5, g4 anyway. G4 is probably no good at this point. So I guess g3 is the way to go. Let's just be patient here. We'll get a rook on the e file, and then maybe plant a knight in here. We have to watch over d4. Maybe bishop back and then king d3 would be the way to do that. Black is passive here, but solid. But this is a long-term weakness. He's got it covered by two pieces right now. So maybe I'm overestimating the weakness of that. But no, when I play knight, if and when I play knight g5, it's hitting 2 threats here, hitting both of these pawns. That could be a useful tactical theme to keep in mind. If I use this rook, he can swing this rook over and be a pain on my h pawn, although my knight guards it for now. I don't want to have to tie my knight to that. All right, we've given up some of our time advantage here. But Billy Samarias looks like they are going to hand it back a little bit. Okay, maybe just if he goes rook h6, I just go h4. He can't really come to g6 because my bishop will always hang on parking that bishop on the diagonal for the long term. Yeah, what's nice is this little pattern here. If his knight, say, comes back here, I drop my bishop back. And if he keeps his knight there for a move, let's say he goes, I don't know, rook c8. Then we've got this, picking the knight. Knight really has to go back. And then e4 seems to weaken c4, and it does. But the knight can't come in. Oh, never mind. He's got this knight here. Forgot all that I said. Those two knights. Keep that pawn on b3. That was a learning experience. Okay, we've got a little time advantage now. Billy Samarias is coming up with some kind of plan, presumably. Okay, doubling down on the F file. Well, let's get a rook on the E file. This makes sense. Long term, I might be able to worm another knight into looking at e5 via d3. So maybe this bishop slides back, and this knight just kind of moseys on through this way. So it's looking at e5 as well. Used to play the French, so that got me familiar with the usual weaknesses. And occasionally I still do play the French. It got me familiar with the usual weaknesses in the position. The French is a great opening to learn, especially since it has lots of ideas, and it is a tactical opening. It can be tactical, and some of the win hour lines in particular are just, you got to know the lines. But a lot of French lines are just very thematic and have lots of common ideas that string through them. Okay, so that rules out rook h6, and it weakens this square some. I could actually think about knight here at some point if I get this defended. If I get this this e pawn defended. Is he plotting this? My knight is loose. That pawn is pinned. So that's probably the plan here. Unfortunately, I don't see a good way to prevent that other than h5 right now. Doesn't seem like the worst concession in the world. h4, I mean. Yeah, I'm going to play it. And if I'm given the chance, I will play h5 as well. Yeah, I really got to solve this problem. This pawn is pinned because this knight. Okay. That knight wasn't doing anything. The knight was guarding this bishop. So now I can spring my knight here, and he needs to trade, and I can recapture with the rook. And that solves some of the problems I've been talking about. He can't capture. He'd have to move his bishop, and then I'd have to find some other way of. Let's see that. Let's look at this. Knight e5, bishop e8. H5 is not such a good move because he has bishop e8. Knight e5, bishop e8. And then I suppose I can just take here. And this gives him another backward pawn where I have this. So he needs to trade knights. And this will allow me to double rooks on this file if I play knight e5 right away. Let's do it. We don't want to take with a pawn here. I want to recapture with this rook. I recapture with the rook, then knight here. Does present a bit of a difficulty. I might have to go knight d2, knight e2. So here I'm looking at takes, knight e7, and he's coming to c6. He's going to hit my rook when he does that. So I might need to go knight to e2 just to guard d4 for the time being. Okay. Okay, well this is fine for me. I'm fine with trading a pair of knights off the board. I think he needs to take with the bishop. Yeah. Okay. Now just doubling rooks. Probably want to do that on the dark squares here. Yeah, just putting some more pressure. I might drop my bishop back to b1 before I double rooks just to maintain flexibility as to where my rooks might go. And actually, that allows me to bring my king up. He's got king f7 if he needs to defend e6, but okay. Well, yeah, let's put the pressure on here. He's going to have knight f5, and then I'll need to trade off my bishop. But I'm happy with that ending, because his bishop is still terrible. Not completely terrible, but pretty bad. Thinking about knight a4 here. What else is that knight going to do? Where else will it go? c5 looks pretty good. If he takes it, he's losing a defender of his... that's a terrible piece, though. I want to keep that knight on the board, not let him trade off that lousy bishop. Where is this knight going, though? Plans here. I'd like to be able to get my bishop to a place to attack that weakness, too. But there's no time because his knight is going to land on f5 and I need to be able to take it. Okay, this knight is going to go on a journey. I don't know where that is going to take him, but that's what we've got. Maybe a g1, f3, h2, g4. Seems awfully long-winded. But get to f3. Actually, f3, and he can just park himself on e5. That's a pretty monster knight. Okay, let's make this trade. That's the plan. Here comes our knight. Surprised he took with the rook. I expected him to get rid of that weakness, jettison that weakness. I could have put a rook on the second rank. After bishop c6, seems guarded, I suppose. Trading the rooks off would be more than happy to do that, actually. Okay. Which way to take? I don't know that it matters. This gives him a little less choice. Now knight to h6, h3 looks good actually. I'm a little concerned about discoveries, but I don't think I need to be. Yeah, he's going to have to take, at which point I'm taking with my knight and hitting his pawn center in a big way. So let's do this. If he pushes g4, then I've got a knight on g5. I'm very happy. Do I take with the pawn, possibly? I don't think that looks very good. No, I've got enough of a grip on e5 with my d4 pawn. My knight looks pretty good here. I'm hitting that 3 times. He's only defending it once. So I think I'm winning that weakness finally. Okay, the long-term plan comes through. Well, we will see. It'll come down to if I can make use of my minute 30 here. If he pushes e5, I will take with the rook. Trades are good for me. Okay. I can get away with rook takes e6, I believe. Knight takes after bishop takes, rook takes. Well, it's the same either way, isn't it? If I go rook g3, that kind of admits I don't have much. Well, I don't want to just trade things off and make it simple for them. I did leave myself that weakness over there. What to do about it? I don't know. Figure that out next time. Not the time, cat. Let's keep that weakness intact. I don't want to just trade off pawns. I'm actually the one with the passed pawn here, for what that's worth. Let's blockade that pawn, and then I'll maybe think about king g4. Okay. Maybe a5 is a good idea to put a clamp on his queenside pawns. Yeah. If he goes b4, I've got g4, and I'm threatening g5. Yeah. Let's go for g4. The knight is very strong here. Okay, now I'm just winning this. Am I winning this pawn? No. That's a tricky move, sir. If I take here, the knight gets pinned. Okay. Now I can slow roll this. I'll just put my pawns on. I've got a clamp here, and he's completely passive. It's the best way through here. Let's start with a check. He can't come to f7 because I've got a fork. And a knight c5. It's going to be hard for him to defend this pawn. It's the classic bad bishop French ending here. This is I've won a tournament game in this kind of style. He's got to go bishop c8. Yeah, I'm very comfortable here. A knight to c7 would be ideal. How do I achieve that, though? Okay, now if he plays his king up, I've got knight here. Check, which will force the king away and win this pawn. That might be enough. Man, it's a brutal game for black, actually. Wouldn't want to be black in that position. Played well, but it was... Whew. One player managed to earn the win. Wow, that might be the highest quality game I've played on here yet. Like I said, I don't think black made any big mistakes, but it was just a slow strategic burn that I managed to carry through the entire game. So let's look at it. I'm excited about this. I mean, it's not the dazzling kingside attack, but that kind of bad bishop, good knight ending is beautiful in itself, I think. Okay, so the French defense, classical variation, the main line. I've been playing some bishop g5 at this spot recently, but I don't like that because, well, let's do the analyze thing. I like the bishop g5 line because black can just take on e4 and go into the Rubinstein, which is sort of dull. Okay. What does the report tell us? One inaccuracy, one mistake. Wow, we both played very accurately. Very accurately. I actually technically made more mistakes than my opponent if you count this extra inaccuracy. Okay. Okay, back to the analysis. Okay, so here e5 instead of bishop g5. I don't like bishop g5 because they can go for this, which is the Rubinstein variation of the French. It's very modest. And a lot of pieces get traded. So yeah, knight cd2 allows us to play c3 like an advance variation. Okay, either one of those recaptures, knight takes d4 or c takes, was good. Bishop b4 check is best. That's really striking to me. Knight to c3 is best. Make him give up the bishop pair if he's going to do that. I'm happy to trade off my bad bishop. They were playing a lot of best moves here. The string of best moves just keeps coming. Even knight c3. Yeah, any move that can make the opponent sort of react is a move worth considering. Bishop d3 is excellent. It likes bishop e2 better. Okay. Knight to e2 is best. I didn't consider that. Did not consider that. I wanted to keep this file clear so I could stack my rooks on it and really target that pawn. My move was, I think g3 is, maybe that's just a matter of taste, and I think g3 sets up a strong structure, gives a lot more hardy defense to that pawn, doesn't tie the knight down to it. Not that the knight is doing much useful right now on c3. Okay, rook a to f8 was good. Bishop to e8 was better. Just trying to get these bishops off the board above all else. That's probably the idea there. Okay, now I have a pawn and a half advantage here. h6 is best. h4, excellent. Knight to e5 was better, huh? Knight e5, see, it seems to hang a pawn. Knight takes d4, knight e2. What? Okay, this is still watched over. Knight back to c6. Now we take on c6. Why not bishop takes c6? Knight d4. Okay, we've spent a pawn, but we're getting into black's business here. We're going to get that pawn back on b7, it looks like. So instead, if black takes, the bishop is even worse. a4? I don't understand the point of a4 here. Knight c8. Bishop takes a6. Oh! We're just preparing bishop takes a6, and we don't want that to be met by rook a8 skewering to a2. a4. Why not just a5? Oh, rook c5. Now defend. Knight d4. And there's no defending both of those pawns. But we're just regaining a pawn here. But still, the material is going to be equal, but white is preferred by the computer by 1.5 points. h4 is fine. We'll keep an advantage. The computer likes the idea of rook to d8. I think that's just a waiting move. I'm not sure what the idea is. Knight e5, but I'm glad I found that. I'd noticed that I had knight e5 to clear my troubles as long as this bishop wasn't defended. So I was happy to see knight to c8. Now knight e5 works because he can't take here because his bishop hangs. So he takes. No, he doesn't take. Bishop e8 is better than taking because now I get to d takes e5. So we're hitting that rook with some tempo. I go back to f7. And we're going to get a knight onto d4, which looks like a strong piece. I don't know. I don't see the monster advantage here because this is a protected passed pawn that black has. Maybe I'm just not that good at evaluating these kind of positions, but rooks are silly on the f-file because they're not doing anything really productive. And my rooks might be better off. Yeah, I've already got one on the c-file. But I would never take with that pawn, personally. I would take with the rook. The whole point is playing against this weakness. And the computer calls that an inaccuracy, so we'll figure. Okay, but bishop e8 was best, and now knight a4. That was my chance to play knight a4. Because I can get a knight to c5, which is just awesome. And if he tries to take, when I recapture, it's a blunder actually. When I recapture, I take there, and oh, his knight is hanging on c8. Right, okay, he couldn't take. This opens up a pin on that knight. That's the key motif. So he can't take because I'll hit back his rook, and then his knight is just simply hanging. Okay, knight takes c6 is still good. Bishop takes c6 is best. Knight to d1 is best. d2. Going knight f2 and then knight to h3. Okay. So doubling on the e-file is not the computer's idea. It likes knight a4 here. I had looked at that. Knight a4. What about bishop takes? Honestly, I was trying to go for this knight versus bishop endgame that worked out so well for me. So if knight a4, what if just bishop takes? I guess the point is I got the c file now. It's all mine. He could play a rook to c8. A rook c5. Really? I want my pawn here to... He just takes, right? I guess the point is I'm coming with some tempo here. Bishop e2, and I'm going to get my rook over here. Got a weakness to hit. It's got to defend pretty passively with knight to d8. Okay. The computer doesn't have the positional rules of thumb that I have. It wants to capture with the pawn on the backwards square here. It wants to do this and give black these two central pawns. It doesn't care about black having a protected passer, basically, in either of those cases. I'm losing a bit of advantage here when I double these rooks. Knight d1. Okay. That might have been a better plan if I was ultimately going to h3 anyway. Knight f5 is good. Okay, here we take. Let's look at taking with the pawn. This is a consequential decision. Now rook e5. Okay, bishop E6, really? C6 looks a lot more stable. But let's see, knight C3, and we're fixating on this pawn. G6, not guarding the pawn with this. Okay. A4. Okay. I guess that position is good enough. Knight G1 is excellent. A better move, apparently. Nah, it's not really that much better. Rook to C3, just getting on that C file. That would, my whole point here is to go after this pawn, so G5 is best. H takes, knight H3, and I didn't see how strong this really was. Rook G5. Here I thought for a while this was a nice defensive resource. That was a good find by my opponent. Apparently A5 is better. And even then the computer wants me to go to C1 instead of grabbing this pawn. Knight takes. Rook F2 check. Rook 1 to E2. Rook takes E2. Rook takes E2. Now Rook F3. What if King takes E2? Isn't that just fine and dandy? Bishop B5. King. Wouldn't you want to go E1? Oh, D1. He's got a rook coming in to check on F1. Some compensation for the pawn, I guess. Now he can go after this pawn immediately. But knight C7 gives me some initiative. I can give up that pawn for maybe getting this one. Bishop C6. Now I have time for this, maybe? That can't be too bad. Just got an extra pawn here. My knight is a little tenuous, maybe. After like, wow. Yeah, my knight's not too comfortable there, is it? Rook E5. Takes G3. Take on D5. Rook G2. King D3. Take A2. This doesn't look like a winning advantage. There's 2 pawns left on the board for each side. So yeah, maybe Rook G5 wasn't the ideal move here. Rook C1, it still wants to go to the C file. What did I play instead here? I just played A5, A4. Okay. Rook F6. King E2. King F3. Okay. Now I'm quite happy. My king is really participating and I've got everything in its right place. Shutting down any possibility of E5. I'd like King G2 better. Oops, gotta back up here. I'm happy to trade off pieces. We trade off these rooks and I've got just a superior ending. Now I'm surprised Black didn't try to play B4 to at least give his bishop a little more scope. But maybe he was worried about not being able to protect a pawn on B4, which makes sense. It's harder for him to get at this pawn on C3, since his bishop is just so blockaded at every turn by his own pawns. Okay, G4, G5. Rook F5 is a mistake. Yeah, because this trades off the rooks. He needs to keep the rooks on the board. That's his biggest mistake. And look at that point differential. I mean, this doesn't cost him any material immediately, but allowing me to trade off those rooks takes it from a 2-point advantage to a 4-point advantage. Also, just practically speaking, it makes my task a lot easier. Let's look at if he had gone back to F8. I'd probably sneak up there with my king. Well, maybe see king g3, and now I'm hitting those. That's an inaccuracy. Makes king e3 better. Now it says it's an inaccuracy. Rook f8. King g4? A mistake. Huh. Just backing off with the rook. Seeking other routes. Okay. That definitely would have given me a lot more to think about, but with the rook trade, now I've got obvious ideas. I thought this was clever, though. I mean, the idea behind the rook trade might have been that there's a little bit of time left, and I just thought I'd go for this, which just drops a piece. I can get a pawn, but he should be able to win this. Yeah, even with a little bit of time left. King e3 is best according to the computer. I don't think it matters too much. Just want to keep my king more close to this pawn for defense. I like how my knight and my pawn form this wall the king can't get through. Okay, now he has to defend that pawn, and he has to go to b7 passively to do it because my knight watches e6. It likes knight d3, and then knight to e5 check. Well, I don't know that it matters all that much. b4 is... I was very happy to get that move, and once I saw that move was in, I thought, this should be winning for me. This is inaccurate. It doesn't matter. I get my king to f4, and my knight's going to have plenty of room to dance around. Knight to c5 is a mistake. Oh, there's knight to c7. And this actually puts back in immediate Zugzwang, doesn't it? He has to leave the bishop here to guard both these pawns. So that means his king has to move, in which case I just grab this pawn. And that's a much simpler win, actually. So knight c5 is a mistake, but it's a game-winning mistake as long as I can get my knight to e5 here. And ultimately, this is probably what black saw. He can't guard this pawn because I've got this, and then I'm just going to pick up that pawn anyway. So that's the weak pawn, and it was just another way to pick it up. So, okay, very proud of this game. I'm even more proud of this than some of my better kingside attacks on here. This was a long haul, and it takes a lot. I mean, I've played a lot of games like this where I get to this advantageous endgame, and then things fall apart because of time trouble and just because of fatigue and the lack of stamina. So I was very happy to make this work. It does remind me of a tournament game I played against a French win-hour sideline where we ended up with a similar ending. Material is equal, but the bad bishop versus the great knight in a French ending like this. And yeah, it's a motif to know, and it's really useful to know that that knight is going to be better than that light square bishop for the French side in this ending. It'll score you some points. So yeah, but knight to c7 would have been nice here. It would have been a very classic way to win this game. Okay, thank you for the wonderful game to my opponent, whose name is evading me right now. Billy Samarias, I believe. So from Spain. Thanks for watching, everyone. Stay feisty.